Right on. Okay, happy Saturday night, everyone. We are here in the Devil in the Details panel. We've got some lovely panelists here. We've got CJ Birch, Dena Blake. We've got Sophia Hagin. We've got Ashley Moore and Santiago. And thanks for the panelists for being here. And this is has been a long day of panelizing if people have been watching them all, and hopefully you have been watching them all. So I think this is the last one for the evening. We talked a little bit, this is going to be the Devil in the Details, and this is about researching for your books. And I can promise you that this is going to be a fantastic panel. There's going to be some good stuff talked about. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have each one of the panelists, hopefully they have a book with them and they can show their most recent release. And I'd like them to give a little bit of a very brief introduction to themselves and about their book. And to, at the end of your introduction, please tell us how much research you did for the book that you just released. I'm going to go ahead and start with, let's go with Ashley. Ashley, you ready? I'm going to put you on.
Sure.
The spot. Okay.
My name's Ashley. I live in South Carolina. I do all sorts of random stuff with my life, and I move a lot. But this is my latest book, Love in the Limelight. It's upside down. There we go. It is about a Hollywood actress who is at the peak of her profession, meeting up again with the love of her life, who is a famous pop star.
And how much research did you do for this book?
I did a fair amount of research. I think I've done more research for my second book that I'm writing, but I did a fair amount of research for this one.
Right on. Okay. How about you, Dena?
Oh. Dena Blake. I write contemporary romance. My newest release is Love by Proxy. And this is a kind of a Cyrano de Bergerac story with a twist. Best friends, where Sophie and Tess offers to help Sophie woo another woman, and things turn out differently than they think. So, and I did not a ton of research, but enough. I had to learn a little bit about advertising and advertising pitches. So,
oh, that's good stuff to know, because then you can pitch your books as well. Yeah. How about you, CJ?
Okay, so my book that I'll be talking about is The Edge of Yesterday. It is what I call a soft sci-fi. It's about a woman from the future who's sent back in time to eliminate certain people from the timeline. And one of the people she's supposed to eliminate, she ends up falling in love with and has to decide where her loyalties lie. And so for this, I actually did quite a bit of research because part of it is set in the future, and I researched a lot of technologies that they might use and what it would be like to live underground and that sort of thing. And then also some research into, because it also takes place in a small town in BC, British Columbia. And I researched the heck out of that because I've only been to like Vancouver and Victoria. I've never been up where it's like kind of like rainforesty. And so yeah, most of it was Google Earth and Street View.
Good. How about you, Sander?
Oh, I have one verse multi right here. It is sci-fi with love sci-fi. I don't know. This is my second book with Bold Strokes. The first book was contemporary romance. This one is sci-fi, and I thought it was relatively gentle sci-fi. I've been told it's relatively probably middle grade sci-fi because it does deal with the quantum universe. So I did a lot of research on quantum physics, more than you probably ever want to know. If you run a really boring lecture, ask me about quantum physics. I am not an expert either. So, but I think it works well in this story. So it's still a good read, and you may learn something. So one verse multi.
Excellent. And last but not least, definitely Sophia, what about you?
My most recent is, let's see, I always get it in reverse. There we go. Not All a Dream. this one took a lot of research. It's a story about an old woman who is looking at a world that has just had a limited nuclear conflict and the long-term effects. It's essentially a nuclear winter. And so I ended up doing a lot of research. In fact, the research I bumped into quite incidentally about simulations of this sort of nuclear event is what launched me. And then I found myself doing whole bunches of research on, well, okay, now how do you feed yourself when it's, you're going to have to live in the dark and probably eat only what you can pull out of a greenhouse, and how many square feet of greenhouse do you need to do that per person? I actually figured all of that out. It's in here in case you want to know. All about biochar, that's in here. So yeah, a lot of research. I always do a lot of research.
That's awesome. It sounds like everybody did research for their books here, so this is going to be a great discussion. I want to start the conversation off with something fun. I'd like each one of you to talk about one of the weirdest things that you've ever researched on purpose. Something that if somebody was to come to your search engine and go in and see a last search, and they would raise an eyebrow or something. And if you haven't, you can say you haven't. I won't believe you, but you can get by on that one. Let's start with Sandra on this one.
Oh, so I feel like I have an alarm going off.
Uh-oh.
Maybe come back to me once it goes off.
Okay, do your thing there. We'll go with you, CJ.
A couple years ago, I was working on a murder mystery, and I was terrified that someone was going to take a look at my browser history, because it was like ways to kill people. If you use this method, how long does it take to die? And it like really, really gruesome stuff. And so there was like just list after list after list of different ways that you could kill people. And I'd say that's definitely up there. So
I would say so too. That would be something to raise some eyebrows. How about you, Dena?
I don't know if there's anything weird. I mean, I did research for Next Exit Home, weird things dogs eat, and how you get them out of them if they eat the wrong stuff, that kind of stuff. Recently, with what I'm currently writing, I'm doing a lot of stuff on crazy hockey fans, what hockey fans do, how they act, stuff like that. But I'm going to say nothing quite like my browser history would be okay. Let's put it that way, CJ.
It would be okay. Somehow I do doubt that, but I'll let you get away with that. And I do know that hockey fans do some really crazy things.
Yeah.
Sandra, is everything okay?
Yeah. Someone's cooking in the other room, and I feel like I hope they're successful. I hope he's doing okay. It's my pleasure.
Okay, as long as you're not bursting into flames. How about you? You didn't get to finish your weird.
I was gonna say my search history is chaos. Because in one browser I've got what are quantum particles, and then in the next browser I've got like how many people can fit in like this type of vehicle before it sinks or whatever. And then one thing I will share that I did not Google, I was on the verge, but then I was like, no, I did not Google how to make a bomb. So there is some ballistics conversation in One Verse Multi, and I was like, I don't know anything about bombs. And I was like, you can't Google that. Don't look that up. So
And find yourself on a list.
Yes,
exactly.
exactly. And I was like, I have things to do, so I don't really need an investigation. So I just grabbed some details off of like cop movie, and then I was like, that seems right, and we'll go with it.
Yeah. Even I'm kind of terrified of, even if it's incognito mode, somebody's watching it. Yeah.
I have Googled how to make a bomb, and so far no one's come for me for my sci-fi, because humans become bombs. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
God.
That's interesting. How about you, Sophia?
Well, I don't even know where to begin with my list. I always in my books at least in the recent ones, find myself involved in figuring out languages that I only speak and write English. I don't know any other languages, but I always end up doing with that. And the work I'm working on now, quantum entanglement is a big deal. Sandra, we need to talk because I have a lot of questions. Again, a lot of stuff about gardening, and particularly gardening indoors, you know, in a greenhouse, and that kind of thing. I learned everything I could about the mental state you have to achieve in order to be a good sniper. That was really fascinating. And I'm about to get into what really dreams are, as best anybody knows.
I'd like to hear that one. I want to know about
Yeah,
that.
me too. I'm still just starting that one.
No, that's excellent. How about you, Ashley?
I don't know if there's anything particularly weird in my search history. I have Googled what the security is like for the Prime Minister of England or of the United Kingdom. That might have gotten me on a watch list somewhere, but nothing really like bizarre that I can think of.
You know, I think that just listening to what you guys are talking about, I'm thinking that every one of us need to make sure that in our profiles of our social media, that we make sure that we put in there that we are an author and we Google weird things. So, you know, just so they say, oh, okay, it's for a book. It's for a book.
Either that or get off of social media entirely and disappear. You can always
Well, I
find
think that right there would be a flag, don't you think?
Well, only if they realize there's somebody not on social media. If they don't know it. You know.
Yeah, right. I can't. You can't quit it. You just can't quit it.
Mhm.
So just to remind the audience that if you have any questions about this, feel free to put them into the Q&A. I'm also watching the chat, so if it comes up in the chat, I'll see that there too. I'm going to go on to the next question. Do you ever find yourself trying to avoid, and one of you've already answered that about the bomb. So Sandra, has anybody avoided researching certain things because of whatever reason? We'll start with you, CJ.
I don't think there's anything I won't look up as we've discovered, because I'll just be like, how do you make a bomb? No big deal, not thinking that, yes, you might be on a watch list. I love the research portion of writing. I love discovering new things. So I think for this book, I Googled weird stuff that vets have to go through. So that's where I learned about like anal gland abscess and all that stuff. Like, what's the smelliest thing that a dog can have? So yeah, no, I'll pretty much go for anything.
That's gross. But thank you for looking into that so we don't have to. How about you, Ashley?
I don't think there's anything that I wouldn't research. Yeah, it's all fair game. Everything.
It's all fair game. That's fair enough. Okay. And Dena.
So since I don't write murder mystery, I probably would not ever research how to kill my wife or anything like that, you know, because that right there would say, hey, you're not really researching. So.
And I happen to like Kathy, so don't do it. Okay, so Sophia, but you.
That's interesting. I find that if there's something that I hesitate to research, then I know I'm in the wrong book. I mean, it's like, give it up and go somewhere else. And the place that I hesitate the most, and I really hesitate, I'm very careful about it, is anything medical. That's a world that is so complex. After having read enough of Radcliffe's works, and she knows what she's doing there, I'm like, nope. I just, you know, there's no way that I'm going to live the next 6 lives long enough to wrap my head around enough of that I would take that on. So to the extent that, say, somebody gets hurt and we need to deal with that, okay, this is why God invented an ER, and that's where you take them and you just leave them, you're on the other side of the white curtain, and whatever happens there happens there. But other than that, I'll take on a lot. Right now I'm dealing with, like I said, a lot of language stuff, a lot of prehistoric stuff, like at the beginning of anatomically modern humans, that kind of thing. And there are huge blank spaces there in terms of what anybody knows, the smartest of us anywhere on earth, which is wonderful territory, because you gather up everything you can possibly find, and then you get to make up the rest. It's great. It's wonderful. So that's the kind of research I like, where there's a lot of, open space, if you will.
Right on. And Sander, I know you won't do a bomb, but
I if I'm in the early stages, I'm pretty willing to look up most things. When I do need to know certain things that might, I don't know, make somebody aware, I'll go to like a library and check out a book. I know they tag those too, but it seems a little safer. And then I think when I'm writing though, and I've landed on concepts, I try not to over research for my character's sake. I want to know a little bit more than the character, but in this book, One Verse Multi, even though he works in the quantum, like in this quantum company, Martin is not a physicist. He knows enough to do his job, and any more than that, he's like, I don't know what that is. Ask somebody smarter than me. So I didn't want to like overwhelm him and seem unrealistic. So there, I have to force a stopping point, because I'm like, more than your character, you're probably gonna overwrite past him, right beyond it. So, but sometimes I do have to go to a library if I really want to know certain things.
that's good. Yeah, alternates to Google. We used to all go to the libraries, right? So yeah. We do have a question here from the audience. Thank you, Renee. And your question is, have you personally interviewed anyone in a particular profession for a character? And we'll start with Dena on this one.
Trying to think. Not really for a profession. I did for Country Girl's Heart. I did a lot of research through my brother, because he was very much a horse person, knew how to ride, knew how to rope, all that stuff. So that would probably be the only person that I have interviewed. Used to be part of a writers group here in Oklahoma, where we had speakers that came in, and they were mostly law enforcement and things like that. So I would get information from them, but I didn't really interview them. So.
Okay. Sophia?
I have to say, not explicitly, although there have been two ways that in my interactions with people have informed, very directly informed stories. One was just some interesting projects over the years. Years ago, I worked on a neural network study back in the 80s, before anybody knew what neural networks were. And I learned a lot about national laboratories and Defense Department security and what DARPA was about and all that kind of stuff. And the other way is, and my first three books were about the military. Well, the first one in particular was about the military. And of course, I have no military background, but Google and all those chat rooms out there are your friend. And people will get on those chat rooms. Lurking in chat rooms is an incredible experience, because these are folks who really need to talk, and they need to share their experiences, and they do, and it's public, and you can get right in there with them and learn a lot. And that I learned a lot doing that. So they weren't really interviews, but as good as, especially since in my case, the interviewer couldn't be seen. I was invisible. So,
there you go. They're going to be a little bit more candid that way, huh?
well, with each other, certainly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how much stuff I get out of Reddit. It's just, it's incredible. Sandra.
I would say one thing about that, which is
Uh-huh.
that don't go to the generic ones. Pick your area, whatever it might be. When I was in the second of my first 3 books, the second one, and also the third, one of my characters, in fact, my protagonist ended up becoming an engineer. Go to the engineer, go to where the engineers get together to talk about, I don't know how to solve this problem. Has anybody got any ideas? And then they start going, you won't understand 3/4 of it, but the quarter you understand will inform your writing. So that's what I did there.
So true. Absolutely
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Target.
Sandra, how about you?
Me?
Sandra? Yeah.
Oh,
Sandra.
sorry, I didn't hear that part. Sorry.
That's okay.
I not in one verse multi, but in my first one, Best of the Wrong Reasons, and then in one I'm writing, there's a nurse, and I agree with Sophia. I'm like medicine is. I'm not going nowhere near that. But my partner's mother is a nurse, and so every so often I'll just shoot her a text, and I'll be like, "Is this something a nurse would do, or what's the worst? Why would I need a nurse in my house? Like how sick do I have to be to get a nurse to come here?" And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, speculating mostly. So I use her as a medical resource a lot from a nurse's perspective. But other than that, like I feel like everyone at some point becomes secretly interviewed by me, and I take tidbits from people, but never a whole profession except for my poor partner's mother who answers my texts.
That's a good resource to have. Yeah. How about you, CJ?
I've actually been considering it for my current book. My wife knows an intimacy coordinator, which is what the book is based on. And it's such a new profession. It's hard to find. I want to make it really authentic. So I want to ask, well, what would you do in this situation? So that will probably be coming. Most of the time I just rely on friends. Like I use a lot of chefs in my book, I noticed, because my friend Jeff is a chef. And so I can just be like, ask him a question. I remember asking my brother, who is an electrician, how much voltage you'd need to kill someone. So I saved myself yet another, how do I kill someone, Google search.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And how about you, Ashley?
I've never interviewed anyone directly. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos of people just sort of like narrating their days. There's something called crofting involved in the book that I'm currently writing. It's like a very specific Scottish legal thing. So I'm really close to like emailing a Scottish lawyer about it, but I haven't quite gotten there yet.
Interesting. Would you just do it cold turkey, or do you know a Scottish lawyer?
I do not know any Scottish lawyers.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, these are good answers.
Find a website.
Yes, there's some good websites, and there's some
Start
good
there.
resources about Scottish lawyers who specialize in this sort of thing. But I went to law school. I sort of know a little bit of law. I've read the actual laws that are surrounding it, but it's still not quite enough for me to really grasp it.
You know, and that's a question I was having a hard time thinking about, as far as there's an art to searching things on the internet, you know, being able to find things that either expand your results, or they kind of narrow them down. And I think in the beginning days of the internet searches, you had to put in your quotes to make sure certain things happened, and different formatting, and things have gotten a lot easier. But what kind of tricks do you have when you are researching something to make sure that you're coming up with real good information, as opposed to information that may not be quite valid or something? How do you know that what you're researching is correct and accurate? I'll start with you, Sandra.
I feel like for me, I have a master's, so it was a research master's, so I have probably an interesting skill set when it comes to researching. So I'll usually start with scientific articles or journals and see who's working on what, if you go to Google Scholar for quantum physics, you're gonna be really sad. So in that case, I started with the big guys like Stephen Hawking, right? So you kind of get a name. I start with getting like a name or two in the industry or in the field who's a scientist. I start with academia first. So that's kind of my way in to information.
Interesting. How about you, Dena?
So I'm gonna say I find some keywords and I'll rearrange them in different sentences in different ways, or I'll search for like, if it's a profession, a day in the life, because you'd be surprised at how much you can find out there on YouTube that people have recorded of what they do on a daily basis. It's kind of interesting. And then they just record their whole day in different YouTube channels, you know. So I found a lot of medical stuff that way. But even different browsers come up with different, different results and all that. So it's just sometimes just a matter of the way you phrase something.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Just to kind of put it out there, one time my dad, and this is kind of funny, my dad researched, he's into cars. He really loved cars, and he searched up hot rods, and he got something he absolutely did not think he was going to get from that
I
one. So,
can't imagine.
rewording or re-putting things together really does help.
And sometimes you have to use those quotes to get rid of some of that stuff.
You absolutely do. Yeah. Yeah. How about you, CJ?
So my trick is I go to Wikipedia and then I go to the bottom and I look at the sources for the article. And then you get like a whole whack of like articles written by people who know about this stuff. So you get more than just what Wikipedia has. And another thing I like to do is look up sort of like articles that are more personal based. Like one of the characters in my current whip is her dad has schizophrenia and she's afraid she's going to get it. And so I looked up articles on to get someone's perspective. And there was a woman who wrote this awesome article about her dad having schizophrenia and what that felt like when she was a kid, because she didn't really know what was wrong with him. And so I actually grabbed a lot of sort of personal information that I could use and rework for my character, and to really get into the fear and the personal and make it more realistic for my character. So that's what that is.
Very cool. Sophia.
I have to say I've used all these techniques, all of them. I would add that depending on what you're looking at, look for trade publications. Keep digging, footnotes in books, reviews of new books. Sometimes depending on what you're talking about, what area you're in. I often go to Google Scholar. I'll actually start sometimes with Google Scholar or just regular Google, which will take you to Google Scholar. I find myself thrown into scientific publications a lot because of what I'm looking for. I just keep drilling down. Penrose, have you read Penrose yet in terms of quantum consciousness? Check him out. He won a Nobel Prize recently, so he knows what he's talking about. So yeah, everything, all of it. The other thing is, I would say that although the browsers have gotten better in terms of search terms, I still will put quotes around stuff, and it does make a difference. And if you find, you go down and it's like, there's only 2 pages of stuff on this, change your search terms, come at it from an entirely different angle and try again. And because when you're not getting a lot of results, it means you haven't asked the right question. And that's a lot. That's actually a big deal, to find the right question. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The algorithms will pick a word in there that you probably don't really care much about. But yeah, the algorithms are pretty tricky.
Also quotes and then plus, more quotes, plus, and try that. That works too
True.
sometimes.
Yeah. Ashley, how about you?
I really like Quora actually because, well, one, you can post questions and have people who are experts or at least purport to be experts come and answer them. And normally the people who answer them do know what they're talking about, and they'll put like in their biography what they're qualified to answer. And you can find, you know, questions that you didn't even think to ask that get, you know, in these spaces where, of course, then it screws up your Quora searches for anything you want to look at in the future because they want to show you more about that and you've moved on to a new topic. But that's sort of one of my go-to places for like the lived experience of the people that I'm trying to write about.
Right on. I'm glad you brought that up. I thought I was the only one in Quora, and you're right. Once you search something, they start giving you all the related stuff to it. And for some reason, they think I'm really into serial killers and things like that, which I guess I am because I read them all right before bed. All right. Okay. No more. Well, we don't have any more questions from the audience. So if you do have any, feel free to kick them to us. In the meantime, I'm going to ask another question. And this is going to, this is about the work that you've done recently or maybe in your past, but is there anything in your published work that you wish that you had done more research on to either enhance the book in the area that the research would be in, or because you might not have gotten something 100% correct and that maybe some readers have talked to you about? So, and hopefully most of the answers here are no, but if there are, I can tell you I've got lots of them. But how about you, Sander?
So One Verse Multi is new. It came out just this month. And so far, nobody's said I've gotten anything wrong. So, and if they do, I be graceful with me, because I am also not a physicist. But I think that for me, it's been interesting where like lived experiences have come up. So I have had like seen on like Goodreads where somebody, I have like a lived experience with alcoholism in with people I like, loved ones, and then somebody on my first book, Best of the Wrong Reasons, made a comment like, my alcoholism experience was this and it didn't align with this, and I think you're portraying it in this way. And I'm like, that's interesting. So like I've had that come up, and I think for me, I just try and be as like graceful as I can and like respectful of those things. And also I know I'm not perfect. So if anyone does find anything wrong in my depiction of quantum multiverses, shoot me a message because I want to know.
They're probably very smart if they can find the mistakes.
Right? I might have to interview them. So
yeah, right. There you go. There's your interview person. How
Yep.
about you, Ashley?
I probably could have researched how animated movies get made a little bit more for my book, but there was like this point where it's like I needed it to work in a certain way for it to fit the story, so I just sort of made it work. So I don't know how true to life it is, but it worked for what it needed to do.
That's a good point. You know, sometimes you might know more about something that's in your book than you'll ever write about, but it gives you the confidence to write about it or gets you where you need to go to on it. How about you, CJ?
There is one thing, there is something on Goodreads about one of my sci-fis where I think I got some math wrong, and they asked a question and I didn't answer it because I was like, you know, I researched the shit out of those books, like really because it's all set in space and I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. So like I researched what you use for like a shield and like anti-gravity. And sometimes eventually I just had to just say, screw it, I can't find the answers. So I just sort of glossed over that. And I guess I've used that a couple of times because in my current book, I kind of gloss over how they time travel, and I just sort of say they fold space. And that's about where I leave it, because time travel, as far as we know, doesn't exist. So it's not really something you can research. But then someone called me out on it in Goodreads. So like, I would have liked to know a little bit more about the science behind the time travel. And I was like, it doesn't exist.
That's right, it doesn't.
This is the best I could come up with. And I was like, at this point, I was burned out from this book because I'd researched so much. And I was like, I had to get it done. It was during the pandemic. I'd already changed it so many times because of the pandemic, because it was originally about a pandemic. And so I was like, you know what? Sometimes it's not perfect, but it is also fiction. So I have to be gentle with myself sometimes and just be like, I'm not perfect. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, authors come off sometimes as knowing everything about what they're writing about, but often we're just
making
kind
it
of
up.
posting with it. Yeah, it's true. Especially, I mean, science fiction. That's
Yeah.
it's mostly made up, right? Speculative.
Yeah.
How about you, Sophia?
I haven't, your first answer, no. In a
No?
word, no. No.
No. Okay. No,
No.
that's awesome. I'm glad.
Yeah,
And Dena. Sorry.
I have all my life, once upon a time, I used to write about IT. In fact, I started writing about IT, don't tell anybody, 1973. There was hardly any IT in 19. In fact, there wasn't. It was called the computer industry. It didn't get called IT for another, what, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, it was data processing back then. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not data.
and hardware. And that was it.
Mhm.
And I didn't know anything. I got hired by this company. I had never seen a computer, much less know anything about programming or any of that stuff. So I had to be extremely careful about what I said, how I said it. Was this accurate? I interviewed in those days. Almost everything I did was based on interviews, either face to face or on the phone. And I took copious notes and I went over it and over it. Sometimes I'd have to call people back and make sure I wasn't, off on some other planet somewhere. So when it came to finally writing books like fiction, I had long developed the habit of being very, very careful about how much I would say, how much I would understand, where to just let it fade to black, And so I'm pretty good at fading to black, and that's how I deal with it.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah, that actually answered a question I had about what do you do when you don't want to go there. But anyhow, Dena, how about you? Do you have any regrets?
No, whenever a book comes out, I think maybe I should have done more research. But in Next Exit Home, I had a veterinarian and somebody called me on something I did in there, and I was like, and I did research a lot for that book. But there was one thing that I didn't even think to look, and it never came up. So I got a little piece wrong. So, and somebody called me on it, but it happens, it's you do the best you can, and like CJ, it's your world, you're building it, you make the time travel transport, I did it and Kiss Me Every Day with a lightning bolt, it's whatever you want to make it. So, but I can't say that there's really anything else that I wish I'd done differently on any other book, because we all know we do a lot of research. Nobody just writes it without even checking. So that sometimes I always feel like sometimes I get it done a little bit more.
Yeah. Sometimes research is hard, and sometimes you think you know something, and it's not the way it was, and you'll get it in there. I think we're humans, and I think our readers know that we're humans,
Just a tiny detail and that's what sometimes people pick up on. So
yeah, and we can look at that as an opportunity to talk to our readers, right?
Yeah.
Go in there and get better later. That's the whole thing about reviews, right? Getting better. or being able to feel good about what you've done. That's what I prefer to think about. So, we've talked a lot about research online and looking for information for our books. But there's other ways to do research too. And one of the previous panels that I was on, I think it was yesterday, it could have been this morning. We talked about going places for the setting and finding out what an area is about when you're looking into some of the things that you want to write into your book. So has your research ever inspired you to travel to someplace or go to a certain business or, you know, somewhere that you wouldn't have gone otherwise? We'll start with you, Sophia.
No,
No, you just stay there in your house?
flat out no. The first 3 books I wrote were, well, the first one, the bulk of it took place in the Philippines. And Google Earth was my friend in those days, but I wrote that book so long ago that even then Google Earth was still pretty primitive. So I changed the names a little bit, and I'm pretty good at visualizing. I used to be a portrait painter, so I know how to visualize, and I know how to get something in my head and keep it there. And that's what I did. I made up landscapes, and I in some cases drew them out, you know, like sketched them, topographical landscapes mostly, and created, you know, essentially battlescapes, and wrote the book like that. But no, I had no desire to go to the Philippines.
Well, you're missing out.
I believe.
Yeah.
I gave up flying in 1995, and I'm not getting back on a plane again. Ever.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was in the Philippines. It's beautiful, but I wouldn't know how
I
to
know.
describe it either.
I've seen
have to-
pictures. What can I say?
I have to go to Google Earth, which I think is perfectly valid. How about you, Ashley?
So I've never gone anywhere that I wouldn't have gone, but researching for this novel I'm writing now about Scotland, I was actually lucky enough to go to Scotland this past October. My girlfriend is Scottish, so I was there to visit her, but I got to do some research while I was there and just sort of immerse myself in the culture, which I think is going to make the book more realistic.
That's neat.
Nice. Nice. CJ.
I would love to, but I can't afford it because a lot of the places that I think I would want to write, like BC, I would have loved to go where I was researching it to get it a little bit of a better feel. But again, everything was kind of in lockdown, and it's expensive to fly across Canada, surprisingly. And again, space, you can't really go there unless you're a billionaire. So mostly it's just my imagination. And then I've written about Toronto, where I've lived for 17 years. So I kind of, a lot of the things I wrote about in that book, I was like, yes, finally, I know what I'm talking about. But
Nice.
usually I don't, so.
Dena, how about you?
So I'm going to say I haven't really gone someplace because I want to write about it, but every place I've written about, I've been to. So in the future, I really want to go to Italy. So I figured, you know, I'll try and work a book in that way. I have a friend that lives there. So that's on my list, but I haven't really gone any place in order to write a book. So
Okay.
yeah.
And Sander.
I also haven't gone any place to write like with the book in mind, except for but like if I hadn't been there before. So One Verse Multi is set here in South Florida most of the time. It's several South Floridas actually, and several Denvers. So I'm originally from Denver, but my first book, Best of the Wrong Reasons, I did go to a small town in Georgia. I drove through and like drove all over the town and was taking pictures, and I'm sure that poor town is like, who is this? Because it's set in Georgia. I've been to Georgia. I remember Georgia from my childhood. I have family there, and so I just wanted to go back and like set a foundation for this town. But then I also just change the name of the town and put in some features that don't exist. So like there's a whole railroad that wasn't there. So if I can't imagine writing from a place I haven't been, unless it's like completely fictional, I make up the whole thing. Just because I tend to love the little pieces of places I've been and capturing that to bring back. So and I'm kind of lazy, so I'm like, I have to learn quantum physics. I'm not going to learn a new place.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's enough, right? Okay, so we've got 3 minutes left in the thing. So I'm going to do a quick kind of round robin thing to get each one of you to answer how much research typically that you actually do typically actually ends up in your book. You know, it doesn't have to be specific or whatever. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that's on the call listening into all these fantastic writers that we're doing a sale on select books over at Bold Strokes. So there's a link in the chat, or you can just go over to Bold Strokes and go in and check it out and get some good books for a good discount. So the question is, how much of your research, and we're going to go round robin real quick on this one since we only have now 2 minutes. CJ, we'll go with you first.
I think it depends on the book, but most of the time I research the hell out of it and about 2% makes it into the book.
2%. Yeah, that sounds fair. How about you, Sandra?
If I research 10,000 words of science, probably 10 of them end up like a single sentence in the book. So very
Wow.
small amounts as well.
Okay. Wow, that's that's a lot. Sophia, how about you?
I think it's probably a little more for me. I seem to do the research in layers. And as I realize, as I'm working along and I realize I need to know more about this, I go out and I get what I need. And so a fair amount of it ends up, but a lot of it's backstory. There's no question.
Backstory, yeah. Backstory is so important. Ashley, how about you?
Say maybe a quarter of what I research ends up in the book. At this point, I know a whole lot about sheep farming, but sheep farming has not shown up a whole lot in the book that I'm writing at the moment. So yeah, I'd say about a quarter of it.
Oh, interesting. Sheep farming. So I would never have thought to research that. And Dena, how about
Yeah,
you?
I'm going to agree with Ashley. About 25% of what I research ends up in the book because, you know, you don't want the reader's eyes to glaze over with all the extra information. So, but I'm going to say probably about, you know, I put blocks of it in an outline and then I only pick parts of it out of it. So
There you go. That's a good way to do that. Yeah, just pick out what you need as you're going along.
yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. We just hit the end of the hour, and this has been or 50 minutes that we had here. This has been a wonderful conversation. I don't feel so alone in my weird research habits, and hopefully y'all don't either. And thank you very much for being here. You guys were great.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everybody for watching.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye. Thank you.